Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Learn Photography with Duck. If I can get the words out, I am your host, Duck. I want to thank you all for joining me tonight. Brian's here. We got Jill here. We got Bonnie. We got Alan. All the regulars, all my Patreon supporters. I really appreciate you guys. And just for transparency's sake, I just bought another webcam, which is what we're shooting through today, because what I hope to do is be able to expand and have my old webcam looking out into the studio, so that way I want to be able to do some studio work and actually have it where you guys can interact with what's happening in the studio. I tried it one time way back when, and it failed miserably because I only had the one camera. And I had a little sports camera, it just didn't work. So now that I have two very reliable webcams, I'm hoping the second time around will go a lot better. So it is because of your patronage that it allows me to progress and bringing you better content. So thank you guys, I really do appreciate it. All right, today we're going to be covering a little bit more in depth into the realm of watermarks. We've touched upon it a little bit in the past. I kind of glossed over the area where you go in and you set up watermarks on Lightroom. But what I like to do today is actually slow that part down and really go into a little bit more detail. Not only in how to create a graphical watermark, but also kind of explain some of the do's and don'ts of watermarking, and even get into some of the philosophy whether you really need a watermark in today's day and age. So I welcome you. Thank you for joining me. Actually, before we get started, any new news from anybody? Anybody's got any good stuff? Excuse me. Any good news to share? Nothing?
I'd like to thank you, Duck, for something.
Uh-oh.
There's a web page that I help manage now.
Okay.
And they sent me an image to put up on the website, but they didn't size it. It was still like over 3,000 pixels wide,
yeah.
And the file was huge. So I edited it down by what you said a couple of weeks ago. So small. Looks great. So thank you.
Awesome. Probably it loads faster and probably looks a lot better because you actually, when you resize down to the appropriate size for presentation, what you're actually doing is you're changing the contrast and the sharpening to that new output size. So it works a lot better. Awesome. All right. Let me pull up very quickly this screen I want to share. When it comes to, anybody else have anything?
I have a question before you get going, Doc.
Sure.
A couple months ago, there was something coming through my feed about these people were selling signatures as watermarks.
Okay. Yeah.
I guess you'd send them your signature and they'd mock something up. So I almost pulled the trigger, but then I thought there's probably a DIY way to do it. Are we going to touch on that when you meant by the graphical stuff?
Yes, absolutely. As a matter of fact, a buddy of mine requested that I do one of those signature style watermarks for him. And I asked him for some, I gave him some homework, which he never completed, so that project never finished up. And why? We're doing some massive flickering here. I don't know why. So I apologize for that. Let me turn that off. See. You're muted. Okay. You're muted, Brian, so I didn't catch that last part you said. You're still muted. Sorry.
I was just going to try and say that for a while there, my picture with the screen was in the corner. I didn't know if that was, there it is again. You see that?
Yep, that's yeah, I put you there.
Oh, okay. All right.
That way when you talk, people can see who it is.
Very good. Thank you. Mute.
Okay. Oh my God, I am doing some heavy duty flickering here. What is, something's really, yeah.
What's your new camera?
It better not be. Actually it's the same brand, just a different model than the one I had previously. And I've been using it, past several days, so this is new. Okay, well, anyhow, let's get back to the desktop. Oh, what happened? There we go. Okay. When it comes to watermarks, the reason for a watermark is to help people identify the image as belonging to you. And this can be important, especially on social media, where you post an image and then that image can go just about anywhere, especially if you have friends that really like it and share your image with their friends who share that image with their friends. After a while, we kind of lose track of who originated the image. So having a watermark can play an important role as far as people being able to find the originator of the image. And there's a couple of schools of thought about where your watermark should be or should be placed. So for example, if we look here, this first, it's not going to let me, all right, let me do it like this. Oh, come on, what's it? I'm having all kinds of problems today. My computer is like really bogging down here for some reason. There we go. Okay. Oh, yeah, no, this is weird. I apologize, guys. I don't know what's going on here. Here we go. All right, so this first one places the watermark right smack dab in the middle of the image, right across any subject or a person's face or the center part of the image. And in my opinion, this is the one I really despise the most, because all of a sudden you're looking at this, what could be a very wonderful photograph, and the only thing I see is a watermark. I can't get past that watermark to really appreciate the beauty of the photograph. All right. So I'm not a big fan of this, but I can understand why people would do it, because this is one of the more difficult types of watermarks to remove, especially if you have some kind of transparency to it rather than being just a solid block across the middle. The second type that is more popular is by placing it off into one of the corners, either upper left, upper right, or lower left or lower right corner. And this method tends to be a little bit more traditional, especially if they're in the lower left or in the lower right corner, because historically that's where watermarks have always been placed. They're on the image, but not in a very visible spot. It's almost a little bit, I wouldn't say hidden, but at least it doesn't detract from the actual image. You can take a look at and appreciate and enjoy the image without having a big old watermark interfering in what you're looking at. The last one is, this one here's my favorite, and this is the one that I use personally when I post images to my own social media. And that's pretty much a banner across the bottom. And of course, just like the previous one where you can put it into corners, you can place the banner anywhere you want. You can place the banner above the image, below the image, to the left or to the right of the image, depending on how you configure your watermark. And while this is probably the easiest type of watermark to circumvent, because all you got to do is just crop a little bit in from the bottom and you've gotten rid of the watermark. While it's the easiest to get rid of, I think it allows for the viewer to really appreciate the full view of the image without anything interfering over it. So whatever method you use, whatever style that you decide to use, just keep in mind that there's going to be people who have a love-hate relationship with watermarks. Now, while I tend to have a love-hate relationship with watermarks myself, excuse me, give me 1 second. Cups. Excuse me. My voice is going on me. While I have a love-hate relationship with watermarks, I understand that there are times where you need a watermark. For example, places where I feel you do not need a watermark is on your own personal website. Most websites are branded, so if you, for example, you go to my website, you're going to see United Photography branded all over the place. It's in the header, it's probably in the footer, it's on occasional pages, all right? My name is referenced in the text, so I don't need to inundate viewers who come to my website with all my images also containing my branding. It's just a little bit too much. And I've actually seen websites like this, and it really, really detracts from the appreciation of the images, because all of a sudden your mind just wanders to all the watermarks that it becomes a repeating pattern. And we as human beings are very adept at finding repeating patterns. All right, so all of a sudden, instead of appreciating the beauty of the photography on the website, I'm distracted by the repeating pattern of the watermarks. All right, so that's one case where I feel watermarks has a negative aspect on your photography. Obviously, if you're printing them, you're not going to put watermarks on them, because either you're printing them for yourself or your friends. They already know who originated the image. They don't need to see it in a watermark. And even if you sell them, people are buying for the privilege of being able to see the image without a watermark. So don't do that to your clients as well. Where I feel a watermark holds its power is in social media. Simply because, unlike a website where you can control where your images are, when you post them on social media, like I said earlier, once it's on social media, it can go anywhere. You have no control over where those images go. And unfortunately, places like Facebook and I don't know if LinkedIn does it, but a lot of websites, or I'm sorry, a lot of social media sites will strip out a lot of the metadata in order to reduce the file size. And with that metadata being removed, they also remove who created the image. If you have your name, if you have your copyright information, if you have, like my metadata, I embed my website into it, I embed my phone number into it, all that data gets erased. And I have no say in that. That is just part of the policy that Facebook has. All right. So what Facebook gets is an image with no way of people knowing who originated it, because all that data has been gone. So for those, I will place a banner along the bottom with my information. All right. So it's not really it's a watermark, but not in the traditional sense. I use it as part of advertising so that people know who took it and how to find me. All right. So when it comes to watermarks, there's those schools of thought. Which one appeals to you is a very personal, choice. I'm going to give you the pros and cons, and hopefully that will help you navigate which way you're going to go. However, I implore you, please, 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 don't do the one right across the center of the image. That ruins it for everybody. All right. All right. Also on this example here, I have 3 different types of watermarks. The first one here is, taking a logo. This is an old logo of mine. You can place a logo or some kind of graphic device onto the image. The other one is you can do a very simple text. And this can be very easily done in Lightroom without too much effort on your part, and we'll be covering that in detail. All right. Or you can do a combination of the two where you're using text, but in a more graphical manner, something that has a little bit of style to it, such as this fancy watermark here, where we use a combination of font styles, font weights, different colors, maybe add a little drop shadow, the whole 9 yards. Okay. And that's something more akin to what Brian was referring to earlier. All right. So we're going to explain all those, how to make them, how to set it up in Lightroom, and how to access them through a preset. Okay. All right. Any questions about the placement of these watermarks, right? You've all seen images with watermarks, so you should be familiar with the different types of placements. Okay. The one thing you have to keep in mind when designing a good watermark, whether it's text-based or image-based, is you want to devise something that is going to work with all your images. And obviously we can't predetermine what our images are going to look like. So we need to make sure that we build in certain features into our watermark in order to work. So for example, you may have an image that has a very light background. So in order to have the most contrast, what makes sense is to have a dark watermark so that it stands out against that light background. But what if you have an image with a dark background? Well, that dark watermark will get lost. So it makes sense to have a light colored watermark for that. But then you get into the areas where you may have a stippled light where the watermark would usually go, and it goes from light to dark to light to dark to light to dark. So all of a sudden you're obscuring parts of your watermark and not quite all of it. So what do you do in that case? All right, so I'm going to give you some tips and tricks on how to overcome that particular issue. All right, so the first thing we want to do is, let's get out of here. I'm going to show you how to do a very simple text-based watermark right within Lightroom. All right, so what I want to do is I just want to get myself an image here. And we'll pick this image here simply because, oh, terrible. That is, okay, it doesn't matter. We'll use it anyway. It's blurry, it's fuzzy, it's a workshop image. But what I want you to look is this part here. What we're going to do is we're going to make a watermark to place into the corner. And if you see down in the lower left, it's very light and bright, while on the lower right, it's darker. All right, so we need a watermark that will apply to both. Now, you might say, well, why don't I make two of them? One light and one dark. You can't. But one of the things that I discovered early on when I did that is that when I'm batch processing images, it takes a lot of time to filter out, well, these are all my light images, these are all my dark images. They're both going to get processed the same exact way, except for this one gets the light watermark and this one gets the dark watermark. Talk about bogging down the process. That mentality in my head lasted probably less than a month before I gave it up and decided to go a different route. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to go. My actor is really doing today. All right, we're going to edit watermarks. All right, and it's going to bring up a dialog box that allows you to really design a text-based watermark right in Lightroom. Okay. All right, so this is the dialog box. Let me enlarge it so that you guys can see everything here. All right, and in order to design a watermark, you're going to need to have an image selected. All right, it doesn't matter what image, but like what I did here, find an image that has some light and some dark areas, so that way you can test it out as you're building it. Okay, so if you notice down here in the lower left corner is the word copyright. All right, So it's already set the template for a standard basic text watermark. Below the image is a text box, and all you have to do is remove the copyright, just delete it, and type in whatever you want for your watermark. It could be your name, it could be your website address, whatever it is you want. Okay. You can even say, you know what, I want the copyright symbol. All right. So I can't. Alt 0169 is the short code for copyright symbol. Okay. You can do copyright 2020. All right. If you do this, just realize when it comes to 2021, you're going to need to go back and change it. All right. So if you want to put a date, keep that in mind. All right. And then, you know, Charles Unitas. All right. And then your name. All right. So that's one way you can create your copyright. If you want it a little bit more generic, just get rid of the date and just have copyright and then your name. Or if you want, you can get rid of the copyright notice because nobody cares anyways. And your images get automatically copyrighted the minute you create them anyway. All right. Or if you want, if you have a website that you would rather have people be directed, unitasphotography.com. All right. So you can put in your URL. What you use is entirely up to you. All right. Now, why would you use a name over a URL or vice versa? It depends on what you want the image to do. If all it is a vanity sake and you want people to say, hey, take a look at my images, put your name. If you're hoping that maybe somebody will hire you for a job, put your website address. All right. That way they can come to your website, take a look at all your work, get your contact information, and hopefully hire you. Okay. All right. Once you have the text, we need to format it. All right. And if we go to the right-hand side, just like all the other panels in Lightroom, you're going to see these tabs. All right. And above the tabs, you're going to see the first choice, whether it's a text-based or a graphic-based watermark. Okay. In this case, we're going to keep it to the text-based. And then after I walk you through, I'll show you how to do a graphic-based image. Okay. All right. Below that is image options. All right. This is only if you're doing a graphic-based image. So we're going to skip that. Next one down is your text options. The first option is what font do you want to use? And what it's going to do is going to pull all your system fonts that you have on your computer, and it's going to let you access all those fonts to create your watermark. So find something that is appealing to you. And what's going to happen is when you make the change, you're going to see a representation of it down in the corner. So you can preview it. All right. Actually, let me break that. All right. Now, obviously, you want it to be readable. That particular font is not readable, so I'm going to go with something else. All right. You can go with basic, generic, Arial, but you want to imbue this a little bit with some kind of personality. Now, if you have a particular font that you use on your website, maybe tie it in with that. Okay. The one thing I would suggest is stay away from fonts that are hard to read. because they're just going to get lost. Nobody's going to be able to read your watermark. And if they need to contact you, they won't be able to because they can't make it out. Okay? So avoid anything that's overly fancy. All right? The other thing you cannot do with this particular utility is you can't mix and match font styles. You can only pick one font style that gets applied to everything across the board. All right. So there's no getting overly creative. Okay. The other thing you don't want to do is have one that is super bold, because it makes it hard to read, and two, you want to be able to not meld so much into the image that it disappears, but you don't want it to be so loud and in your face that people's attention deviates from the actual image down into the corner. All right, so find something that has a little bit of character, not too weighty, okay? And of course, I don't have too many really crazy fonts. So what I'm going to do is I'll go with Gotham. Gotham book is a little bit heavier. Where is it? Okay. That's not looking good. There we go. I'll use something that matches my website. Okay.
Good question, Doug.
Yep.
What does align left, right, and center do? Is that supposedly where it's going to fit on the print?
Okay, so no. The align left, center, and right is the justification of text. All right, so in this particular case, I only have one line of text, which is just a website, but you can easily do something like Charles Unitas on one line, and then your URL on the second line, and that alignment is going to just, between those two lines, make it so that they're either left, center, or right justified. Okay? All right. So, for example, if you decide that, your watermark's going to go in the lower left-hand corner, you want everything left justified. Okay? If you want it in the right corner, then it makes better sense to have everything right justified. Make sense? Okay. The next one down is the color, and by default, it's white. All right, and if you click on it, you're going to get your color picker. All right, and if it looks black and white here, don't worry. As soon as we start bringing our color in from the extreme ends, you're going to be able to pick your color. All right. So now it's time to start making our first real global long-term decision. All right. Now, I said earlier that you want something that's going to work well with both a light color background in your image or a dark color background in your image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold off on picking a color just yet. And I'm going to show you the next part, which is the shadow. All right. What it does is it adds a shadow, like a drop shadow, behind your text. All right. And a shadow by default is always going to be dark. All right. That's just think of, a regular shadow, all right? But whenever we do any kind of drop shadow effect with text, what it's usually doing is it's adding black over the surface of whatever's below it. So whatever color is behind the text is going to get shaded darker. All right? So once we understand that we can't have, for example, we can't have a white drop shadow. It's always going to be a black drop shadow. We can then use that drop shadow to work against light areas, because the dark shadow on a light background is going to darken that background and make that background available. So if I take this and make the default text white with that drop shadow, all right, you can see that white text really, really stands out against the white parts of that background because of the shadow. All right. So knowing this, we don't really need to have a dark text. All right. Because one, dark against white becomes very, very stark. All right. Now all of a sudden, our eye again is being drawn into the corner. All right. However, if we were to place that in this corner where we have dark aspects of our photograph, that dark text along with the dark shadow is going to start disappearing. So if the shadow disappears and we have to rely on the darkness of the text that also disappears, we get into a bit of a failure. So in this case, it makes better sense to have a light colored text. But white against, a dark background, again, you have a lot of contrast. It makes it really, really pop forward. All right. So I often tend to lean to a more lighter, but closer to a mid-tone. Okay. And of course, I want to add a little bit of color. So I usually go to a light color like yellow, or you can have like a light blue, light red if you like. Okay. Or you can even get away with like a really bright red. Okay. But these colors kind of lay between the brightest brights and the midtones. So somewhere in between those tends to work best, because we're relying on the shadow to stand off against the light areas, and we're relying on the text color to stand off against the dark areas. Okay. So here you can see I have like a rose color, and that watermark is standing off because of the shadow. If I move it over to the opposite corner, you're going to see that bright light pink is going to stand off. All right. I'm actually going to change it to yellow because I'm partial to the yellow colors. Okay. All right. And then which brings us to, let me explain these tabs. All right. The first one is opacity. Opacity is how transparent something is. All right. So you can have, if you bring the opacity all the way down, it's like you have no drop shadow. So it doesn't make any sense. But if you place it in the middle, it gives you about a mid-tone drop shadow. And if you go all the way to the top, it's going to give you your darkest drop shadow. The offset is how far away from the text that drop shadow moves. All right, and you can see that you can move it quite a bit, and it gives it the appearance of floating off the page. All right, I'm not a big fan of putting too much distance, just because it convolutes things and makes it a little bit more difficult to read. So I like to keep that offset just 10 to 15 points off of the edge of the lettering. The next is the radius, or feathering, or softness of the shadow, how it transitions from the hard dark in the interior to how soft it becomes to the exterior. Obviously, if you make it too soft, it's just kind of like this gray cloud around your text. And if you keep it down all the way to 0, it becomes kind of like a hard-edged outline. All right, so again, this one is something that where I will put anywhere 10, 15 points off 0, depending on what style you like. Okay, and then the angle is related to the offset, in which direction around the dial you want that drop shadow to be. All right, so if I bring my offset out a lot, you can see how it kind of rotates around the text. All right, so 180 or negative 180 is to the left of the text. 0 is to the right of the text. All right, and then in between that is anywhere along those polar coordinates. All right, so typically what I like to keep in mind is people's attention are going to the center part of your image, or the brighter part of your image, all right, which is typically somewhere within the center part of your composition. Okay, think of that as your light source, and that light source is shining down on your watermark, creating that drop shadow. So if your watermark is in the lower left, it makes sense that the shadow would be to the lower left of your text. If you put your watermark to the right side, the right corner, then you want that drop shadow to be to the lower right side of your text. It's just one of those psychological things that ties everything together, all right? If you don't follow that convention, it kind of makes people look at it and says, oh, there's something wrong there. I can't quite place it, but that's the reason. All right, think of the middle of your image as being the light source casting the shadow. Okay? All right, so that's the part for the text options. The last part is where we are going to place our watermark. All right, and we have a few selections. The first thing is opacity. All right, the same type of opacity for the shadow, but this one now applies to the actual text. All right, right now by default, it's at 100% opaque, meaning that you're not going to be able to see through your image. Okay, you can reduce the opacity to make it less visible and allow some of that background to come through. All right, this is just a way of softening your watermark without completely removing it. All right. The next one is size proportion, or make to fit, or make to fill. All right. I'm going to go from the bottom up, and I'll show you why you don't want those two bottom ones. Fill just takes up whatever the biggest space is in relation to the text. All right, so the text is longer than it is taller. So it's going to fill the tall part before it fills the long part. So you can see it doesn't make any sense to have this type of watermark, okay? Unless you maneuver the characters so that it properly fits, all right? The second one is fit, which is just the opposite. It takes the length and fits the length within the image instead of the height. All right. Both of these, I don't even know why it's an option, but it is. I never use them. I don't recommend it. All right. What I do recommend is hitting the proportional. And this is a percentage based on the output, all right, what you output, all right, not what you took, all right. So if you have, for example, a camera that's 21 megapixels, you got a file size that's 5,300, pixels wide, all right. It's not proportional to that. It's proportional to what your end output is. So if your end output is 1,000 pixels wide, it's going to be a percentage of that final output. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to preview the actual what it's going to look like right here on the screen. Right. So if we go up to 150%, it's as if we told it to fill. If we bring it to 100%, actually a little lower than that because we're longer, it takes up the entire space, all right? I find roughly anywhere between 10 and 20% tends to be really good. In this case, about 20% works it, okay? And obviously it depends on how long your watermark is, all right? In this case, the United Photography is the longer part, all right? So if I said I want, my name to be a little bit more visible, I might want to increase that, a few points, make it 25 instead of 20, all right? Judge it accordingly, all right? The next part is the inset, all right? So right now, it's placing the text all the way to the left and all the way to the bottom. There's no buffer between the edge of the image and your watermark. So the next part, the inset, is the buffer space between the edge, all right? So horizontally, okay, I find that usually about 3 points is good. All right. And if you want, you can have it, depending on your watermark. In this case, I have 3 points from the left, 2 points from the bottom. And it seems to be a pretty decent placement. Okay. Now, remember earlier I said sometimes you may want it in the lower right or upper left or upper right or in the center, all right? The last part of this is where on your image you want to anchor your watermark, all right? And by default, it's down here, lower left, but I can always go here and say I want it on the lower right. Now for this, now we have our text that's justified to the left. Like Brian pointed out earlier, we can check it, go up to the top and change our alignment from left to right. And now we have something that looks like it fits. We're going to come back down to the angle of our drop shadow and we're going to shift it over so that it looks like it's coming in from the lower right, okay? And now you can see the benefit of having a light color to your watermark, because against the darker background, that watermark now comes through. If we place it back over where it's light, we are relying on the shadow to show us the watermark. All right, so here is the perfect case of how you can have a single watermark that will work on all your images without you having to worry about, oh, is it a dark background? Is it a light background? Okay. As a matter of fact, here you can see how there's a little bit of a bright part of the waterfall that is behind a watermark, and that watermark doesn't get lost because we have the drop shadow to keep it there. And here where it's very dark, our drop shadow is completely lost. It gets lost in the darkness of that part of the image, but we have the light part of the text to read off of. All right. So that is my version of how to make a proper, very usable, very universal watermark right in Lightroom. Okay. Once you get your watermark looking the way you like, it's time to save it. All right. So what I want to do is I want to keep in mind some of the attributes that I've placed here, because I'll show you how to make variations of it. All right. So I'm going to go save, and it's going to ask me for a name. Now, if you've watched my other videos on creating presets, you know that I prefer naming my presets according to what they do. All right. So in this case, all right, this is a text-based watermark that has both my name and my URL, and it's on the lower right side of the image. All right. So obviously I put my real name, Charles, rather than my nickname, Duck. So I can even, say to myself, I'm going to use a shorthand version. I'm going to go copyright Alt 0169 CU for Charles Unitas. All right. And I'm going to put LR for lower right. Okay. So this lets me know that this is copyright Charles Unitas, and it's placing it on the lower right. And I'm going to go ahead and say create. Okay. And we're out. I'm going to go back, edit watermarks. Okay. And the drop down, here are a lot of watermarks that I've made. Okay. I'm going to go back to the one that I just created. All right. You can see it right here. CULR. I'm going to select it. It's going to reload it. I'm going to change it so it brings it back to the lower left. I'm going to go ahead and change the angle. The angle of my drop shadow. I'm going to change the alignment to be to the left. Everything else stays the same. I'm going to go ahead and save, and I'm going to give it the name Alt 0169 for copyright, CULL for lower left. All right, and I'm going to hit create. Now I have two text-based watermarks that I can use. I have it at my disposal, and I can decide based on the type of image that I'm putting it on, whether I want to put it on the left or whether I want to put it on the right. Okay, so I have that option. All right. Any questions about creating text-based watermarks right inside Lightroom? Anything? No, it's pretty standard. It's pretty straightforward. Okay. Now, all we've done right to this point is we've created them. We've not created anything where we can use it. All right. So now I want to export this really bad picture. All right. I can right click, and from the drop down I can say export. Go all the way to the top. Export. Brings up my dialog box. All right. And second to the last, right here, is where we can determine whether we're going to add a watermark to our image or not. Okay, so we're going to click where it says watermark, and then we're going to select something from our drop down. So our drop down opens up, and these are all my watermarks that I have already created, and you can see that the first two are the ones we just created. All right. So if I put lower left, come on. When I export this image, all right, let's see, show in Explorer. Okay, export. Second, go import that image. And there is my image. I open it up. And there it is, a very large, very gaudy, text-based watermark, lower left. All right? And it's as simple as that. Okay? If you decide, well, you know what? That preset has it to the lower left. I want it on the lower right. All you got to do is just say, hey, before I kick it out, I'm going to switch it to lower right. Okay? All right, delete, yes, okay, escape. All right, any questions? Fairly straightforward. All right, okay. What about a graphics-based image? All right, now hopefully you understand the basic principles of building a proper text-based watermark that allows you to use it both on light and on dark backgrounds by being conscious of the color selections that you make with your watermark and by applying a drop shadow. So what we're going to do is we're going to take those lessons and we're going to apply those lessons into a graphics-based watermark. Okay? So for that, I'm going to switch over to my, all right, let me create file, new. I'm going to create a new document. Now, because we're using a image rather than a font, we have to take one other consideration when we are making our graphics, and that is the resolution of our graphic in relation to the resolution of the image output that we're going to be using. All right, so for example, if you take an image with a camera that spits out a 5,000 pixel wide image, and you want to be able to export at full size with your logo or with your watermark on that, you want to make sure that it looks proportional and the resolution works properly with that large resolution image. All right. So I would say start off with a canvas size of 5,000 pixels. However, the reality is, are you ever going to be putting a watermark on a 5,000 pixel wide image? Probably not. So you need to take a little stock into what, the reality is of how you're going to use your images. All right? And the reality is most of the images that you're going to watermark are for internet use. All right? And we've learned that for internet use, we really don't need anything higher than a 1920 by 1080 resolution, because most screens are 1920 by 1080. All right, now we can manipulate a little bit and say, we're going to upload a 2400 pixel wide image that's going to get scaled down, and that's going to increase the contrast a bit. It's going to pump up our saturation a bit just because of that scaling effect. All right. So if that's the case, you're going to need to make a logo or a watermark that is appropriate to a 2000 pixel wide image. So you need to put a little bit of thought as to where you're going to use them and how you're going to use them. Okay. All right. So in order to kind of hedge our bet, let's make a file, a document size of 2000 pixels wide. All right. Because we know if we make a 2000 pixel wide image, we can take that 2000 wide pixel image and very easily put it into a 5000 pixel wide photograph, and it's going to be about a third of the width. Good size for a logo. All right. So 2000 by, let's say, 1000, just to start. Okay. So 2000 by 1000. Okay. And I want my background content to be transparent. Transparent. All right. Now, the reason we want it to be transparent is because when we export our finished logo, we want that transparent background so that when we place it over our photograph in Lightroom, we're able to see through the logo. Any text will be able to see through it. Otherwise, it's just going to look like a big rectangle of white with your logo on it, which we don't want. Okay? So we're going to make that transparent. sRGB, everything else is pretty much the same. And we're going to go ahead and say create. All right? Now, if we start creating on this particular background, it's going to get very annoying because of the checkerboard pattern. So the first thing I want to do is I want to create, not a mask, I want to create a solid color layer. Solid color layer. All right. So if we go all the way down to the bottom, right here, click on that black and white circle. Okay. Solid color layer. And what you want to do is you want to pick something neutral. All right. So we're gonna go to a gray tone. All right. So hue, maybe 0, saturation 0. And brightness 153. Oh, let's see. Oh, it's percentage. Okay. 50%. There we go. Sorry, I got confused there a little bit. Brightness 50%. Okay. Now I picked the 50% gray because it's going to allow me to check how my lights and my darks are working within the logo or within the text that I'm going to be building. All right. So we're going to kind of keep this simple. Just realize that you can create, something a little bit more complex. So I'm going to take my text tool, all right, and I'm going to, nope, sorry, that's not what I want. Come on. All right. Let's see. Let's see. Unitas. We'll keep it simple here. Unitas. Oops. Okay. On one line. And then I'm going to do another one. And it's going to be photography. Okay. All right. So obviously you can build it according to your needs. All right. So we got Unitas on one line. All right. And let's give that, where's my paragraph? Oh, here. All right. So if you can't find it, go to the top, view, or I'm sorry, Windows. All right. The paragraph. Okay. There we go. Character and paragraph. So character. We'll go something fancy. We'll make this one a little bit fancier. What's a nice fancy? I don't have too many fancy fonts loaded. Oh, here we go. Well,
you can load of my machine.
Yeah, well, no. All right. Mine used to be very loaded with fonts, but I downsized it when I closed up my tattoo shop. I kind of downsized the fonts, got rid of a lot of them that were in my fonts folder, reorganized. I have, I don't know how many thousands and thousands of fonts, and I ended up kind of reworking my font structure and never loaded them back up. So, all right. And I'm going to make this one yellow. So I have thousands of them. I just don't have them all loaded here. And now I'm kind of regretting it. All right. So there's, oops. I'm starting to make all these extra fonts here. All right. So we got Unitas in yellow. All right. And I don't, okay. And let's make that really large. Oops. And why is this? Yeah, my computer's really acting weird today. A lot of skipping. All right. And then we'll go over to photography. And you know what? We're going to keep that a contrasting font. All right. But maybe we'll make it a little bit thinner. All right. So we'll go Gotham. Yeah, see? Something thinner. Okay. And then we'll take our Unitas and we'll make that a little bit bigger. Cancel that. And I really starting to hate my computer here. All right. Okay, I'm not going to get too crazy. The thing is, you want to create something that is uniquely yours. All right, let me move that up. Okay. All right. Now, we got some fairly bright lettering. All right. What we need to do now is we need to add our drop shadow. Okay. So if we come to our layer, all right, and like, for example, I want to add a drop shadow to the word photography. If I double click anywhere on that layer, it's going to bring up my layer style box. And right here are all our effects that we can apply to our layer. And what we have here down at the bottom is drop shadow. All right, so we're going to click on that. It gets selected. And now, by default, it adds something. And all we have to do is manipulate this to our liking. So what I want to do is I want to, give it a dark shadow, because remember, I want this shadow to stand off against any light parts of my image. So I don't want the shadow to be too light. All right. The distance is going to be fairly close. All right. Again, you don't want to make it look like, well, maybe you do, like your text is floating completely off the page. All right. Your angle, I'm going to make this so that it works in the lower left-hand corner. So I want my light source to be the middle of the image, which is, the upper right part of the logo. Okay. And my feathering, all right, I want to make it look natural, not too hard. All right, that's a little bit too sharp, too intense. I want it a little bit softer. Okay, there we go. So that's looking pretty good. All right, and what I want to do is I want to copy that to the word Unitas. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to hold down the control key and we're going to drag the effects from the photography down onto Unitas. Oh, I'm sorry. What was it? Is a shift? It's one of these. Give me a second. There it. It's Alt or Command on a Mac. Alt will duplicate it. I knew it was one of those. All right, and what it does is it duplicates it. Now,
that again slowly. That to me is like that's important to me.
Okay.
I never knew about.
Yeah. So if you want to duplicate any of the effects, all right, press and hold the Alt or Command key, and then you're going to just drag from the layer that has the effect, and you're going to move it to the layer that you want the effect applied to, and it will just copy it. All right. If you press just the control key, it will move it. So if you say, oh, you know what? I don't need it on this. I actually need it on that. Just use the control key. Now, the one thing you will notice, and this is coming from a graphic designer's point of view, and Brian probably already picked this out. I copied the same exact effect from the word photography, and I applied that to the word Unitas. I did not change anything, but if you look at it, it looks like it's a lot darker. The reason being is that the lettering is heavier. So the shadow area is in contrast to the thinner photography is bulkier. So it visually appears darker because there's more shadow. All right. So now what happens is balance-wise, visually, even though they're identical, it looks like the shadow under Unitas is a lot darker than the shadow under photography. So we want to balance that out. We're going to go to the drop shadow here. We're going to double click on it, which pulls up our layer style. And the opacity, I'm just going to drop it down until it starts looking a little bit more even or in balance to the lower part. All right. So you can see at about 70% opacity makes it look a little bit more balanced, right? Everybody follow that? Okay. So now you got your logo looking the way you want. You can do, all kinds of effects. If you've never played with the effects panel, I suggest you spend some time because there's all kinds of neat little things here. You can add bevels, all right? You can add, like 3D effects, all kinds of really, cool things, all right? So play around with it, all right? In this case, we're just going to stick to our shadow. All right, so now we got it looking the way we want. It's at a good size, so resolution will hold up on large images, and we know that for the smaller outputs, it's just going to get scaled down, so we're good there. What we need to do now is create a working file that we can reference in Lightroom. And because we want a transparent background, we are going to create a PNG, a portable network graphic file. All right, so the first thing I want to do is that color fill layer that we placed when we initially set it up. I'm going to go ahead and turn that off. Okay, now you can see why that layer is important. Imagine trying to make this logo with all that checkerboard pattern behind. It would just drive your eyes crazy. All right, so having that grayscale temporary background really simplifies things. All right. The other thing I want to do is I want to crop the finished size. We have a lot of empty space above and below. All right, so we go to our crop tool. You could either come here and click on the crop tool, or you can just press the letter C. All right, we're going to clear this. All right, we're going to go to our original ratio. All right, and I'm just going to bring the top in and the bottom. All right. Come on. And it's one of these. Why can I never remember? All right. See, this is what happens when you don't use something all that often. I forgot which how to take the constraint off. How's that for a blunder? Oh, I know why. Duh. There we go. We want to keep it to width and height resolution. There we go. All right. I do want to give it a little bit of buffer around it. All right. Especially because you got to keep in mind that there's a drop shadow. Okay. Now, if you want, you can do this before you turn off your color fill layer if it makes it easier for you. All right. You want to create a little bit of a buffer between the edge of your logo and the edge of the actual file. All right. Once you have it cropped accordingly, going to go ahead and say OK. Now we'll remove our background. Now we're ready to export it. All right. We have our logo with a drop shadow against a transparent background. We're going to go File. We're going to export. All right. Save. We can do Save for Web. All right. Here we're going to, you can go all the way up to the top, upper right, where it says Preset. And there's a couple of presets. One of them is PNG 24. You can go ahead and click on that. All right. It's a 24-bit PNG. Make sure the transparency is selected because we want to keep a transparency, otherwise referred to as an alpha channel. Alpha channel. All right. Everything else should be pretty much the same. It's going to be at sRGB, which it already is. All right. Our image size is 2000 pixels wide, and our final crop size, because we brought the top and bottom in, is at 654. Everything looks good. Go ahead and say save. Now, where you save it is going to be important, because you want to be able to find it in order to let Lightroom know what file to use. You don't want that file moving around, so place it somewhere where you know it's going to be safe. All right. Now, in my particular case, on my computer, I have an external drive. No, I'm sorry. I have an internal drive that I have set up with, let me, large icons, okay, that I call assets. All right. And you can see this one here is called Assets Adobe. All right. So if I double click on that, I have custom assets downloaded. This is where I keep all my Adobe stuff. Brushes that I've downloaded, actions that I've downloaded, actions that I've made. All right, things like that. Plugins. I have my Lightroom presets, things like that. All right. So having a folder like this becomes a central hub of everything that you do within your Adobe products that are specific to those products. All right. So in this case, I'm just going to make a, I'm going to call it UP logo sample. Oh, and of course I got my caps lock. UP logo sample. Okay. And it's a PNG. All right. And we're going to click save. All right. So now I know where I saved it. All right. Everybody with me so far? I know it got a little convoluted there a bit. All right. I'm going to go back to Lightroom. Okay. Because now we've already made the PNG. We've gotten it the way we like it. We've exported it. We now have a physical file. All right. We're going to go back up to the menu. We're going to go Edit, Edit Watermarks. And now we're going to create, instead of a text, we're going to create a graphic. Okay? And as soon as you click on that, it's going to ask you to locate the file that you want to use as a graphic element. All right? So remember, it's in my Adobe Assets folder. And there it is, uplogosample.png. All right? So I'm going to select that, say choose, and it places it right down here. Okay, and I got some kind of funky text in there. I think I forgot to remove one of those text layers. All right, and now what we want to do is we want to make it, yep, see, look at that. I exported some funky stuff with it. All right, we're going to disregard our text options. That's all grayed out. That's not available. We're just going to come down to this bottom part, and we're going to say, where do we want to place it? How much of an offset? All right, and all that stays the same as previously. In proportion, all right, maybe I'll make this a little bit smaller. I'm going to do 15%. All right, and I want it in the lower left, all right, or maybe I want it in the lower right, wherever you want. Center, okay? Once you've gotten your logo in place, looking the way you want, you do the same exact thing. You come and save, UP logo lower left, all right? And this is my sample. All right, my logo sample. All right, create, and it's done. It's as simple as that. Now I can right click, go to export, export, where it says watermark. I drop that down, and there is my new watermark that we just created. All right, select that. Say export, wait for process, and then I have it so that on export it opens up and shows me in Explorer, and we open that up and there's our logo down in the corner. And it's literally as simple as that. Simple as that. All right, any questions so far? Okay. Now, yeah.
You just saved me a bunch of money. Where do we send a check?
Yeah, exactly.
It's too cool for school right here, as far as I'm concerned.
All right, now, let me get out of here. All right, so let's say, all right, where? Oh, there it is. It's all the way underneath it. Okay, so we're going to go here. All right, let's say you wanted to do something that looks handwritten. All right, now we're really stepping it up. At this point, I would suggest one of two things. Get yourself a tablet and a stylus and hope that you have very nice handwriting. Okay? Or get yourself, what I would do is get yourself like a Sharpie marker, a white piece of paper, and then go down the page and just very nicely, very cleanly make it a little bit artistic because we're not replicating your actual signature. Most people's signatures are kind of nasty looking, but you want something that looks graphical. All right, so you're going to need to practice it a bit. And what I tell people is fill the page. Just fill the page. Once you have the page filled, you can then look it over and say, okay, I like this part of this one. I like the middle part of this one. And I like the last part of this one. All right. And then you can scan it. If you have a scanner, just slap it on your scanner or scan it into your computer. If not, put some light on it. Take a nice picture with your camera. Anything that's going to get it into your computer. All right. And then once you have it in the computer, you can then clean it up, assemble it, make it look like an actual signature. All right. And at that point, you're going to give it the color that you want. You're going to give it the drop shadow like we just went over. You're going to export it as a alpha channel PNG with your transparent background, and you're good to go. All right. All right. So now if you have a tablet, all right, you can always see if you can do something creative. All right, and you can see how difficult it would be. So I highly, highly recommend the filling up the sheet and scanning it in because it allows you to work a little bit more fluidly. But you can very easily do something like this. Or if you have a if you have a vector-based program, you can do something with vectors. All right. Those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, just completely disregard it because it's just way too complicated. All right. The easiest way is just scan it, get it in, clean it up, make your signature, put it on the transparent background, and you're good to go. Okay. All right. Any questions? We covered quite a lot. All right, but hopefully it's given you some ideas of how to create your own graphical watermark. If that's above your pay grade, you at least know how to make the proper text-based watermarks. All right, and hopefully I've given you some do's and don'ts about how to place your watermark and how to make it look readable. So, open for questions.
Thank you.
All righty.
I have a question. Took me a while to get to the button. So, I sometimes work straight into Photoshop. So, does Photoshop do this? Or if I want to have a watermark, do I do what I'm doing and then the Lightroom to get a watermark on it, or just wing it with the PNG I've created in Photoshop?
It depends on your workflow. Like, for example, my workflows typically start and end with Lightroom. If it deviates somewhere in the middle into Photoshop, I always come back to Lightroom. All right. Now, I know you work a little bit differently than I do. Others also work differently, where, you know, you may initiate the project in Photoshop and maybe not even see Lightroom. You can do the exact same thing. Once you have that file with your logo, whether it's the text-based logo or graphical, stylized text or a graphical element, you still have that as a PNG somewhere on your system. And if you made it the appropriate size that will work with large images, you can always import it into any file you're working on, scale it accordingly, and then export it out right from Photoshop. All right. The trick is just watching your the size of your watermark. You don't want it to be too small that you need to size it up, because that's just going to introduce all kinds of problems. You want to be able to size down to make your watermark. So, but once you have it saved, you can use it anywhere. As a matter of fact, I nothing to do with photography, but on occasion I'm asked to sign documents in a PDF reader. I actually scanned my signature and it's saved on my computer as a PNG file. So anytime I need to sign a document through the, either AccuSign or Adobe Acrobat, I just reference that file and it adds my actual physical signature because it's a PNG file. So it's the same exact process. All right. Any other questions?
Maybe a little bit off topic, Doc, but saving to social media, do you reduce the resolution at all of your for Facebook?
Yes.
Instead of putting like a 300 dpi file, do you stay down 72?
That doesn't matter, honestly.
Okay.
If my image is 1920 by 1080, it's going to be 1920 by 1080 regardless.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not like a printer that relies on that information. A screen, 100 pixels across on a screen is 100 pixels across on your photo. So.
Okay.
I can add that for social media stuff, there's usually approved aspect ratios for different platforms. They change from time to time, but if you go out and Google those things, so if you're out there producing things, you can do them so that they're the right aspect ratio. That helps a lot.
Yeah. Case in point, Instagram has a very specific aspect ratio. It used to be square. It's no longer square. They've gone away from that square format, and it's now rectangular. And I think it's more up and down. It's more portrait rectangular. I don't know what the aspect ratio. It's like 4:3. It's some crazy aspect ratio. But yeah, you're right. Aspect ratios play a lot. We're starting to see more and more influence from the cell phone world into the desktop world, right? Because of social media. Okay. It used to be if you had a cell phone and you wanted to upload videos to YouTube, this is what they told you to do. Make sure you hold your camera in the horizontal format. All right. Because the vertical format, what they would do is they would do that kind of weird sideways letterboxing where they would put the black on each side of the image in order to fit the full video in there. Now they're making it so that they're no longer letterboxing it, they're just making the view screen longer. So we're getting away from some of the old norms into the new cell phone world realm, much to the chagrin of a lot of old diehards like us, right? But yeah. Any other questions? We don't have to be on the topic of watermarks. We can anything you want, So, no other questions? Nothing? All right, guys. Next week is Photoshop. I don't think I've picked a topic. So if anybody wants to toss something my way, I'm more than willing. Otherwise, I'll just pick something. I have a short list. I'll just pull something from the hat. The other thing I want to discuss is the third Monday, which tends to be our kind of like generic topic format. I want to have one or two photos to critique. Well, I think we'll start off light, maybe one or two, depending on how many people decide to get brave. All right, so I'm going to be putting out a post. If anybody is willing to share an image for critique, I ask that you send me if you can, send me the raw file with your edits. If not, at least a higher resolution JPEG. And then we'll do a little bit of critiquing and maybe do some manipulation and see if we can get it looking a little bit better and addressing any issues that you may have. So look for that, and hopefully we'll start making that kind of like a regular feature for our normal Q&A, where we just, pick one or two images to kind of like go over and learn from. It's a great learning tool. It really is. So just want to make you guys aware. So anyhow, I want to thank you all. If nobody has any other questions, I want to thank everybody for coming.
I have something. It's not a question, but it perhaps is a topic, and I've kind of touched on this before. But one of the things, speaking of social media, one of the things that I end up doing is I take more pictures than I expect on my phone. I have a pretty good camera on there, or I'm just when I'm out and about without my camera. So really, what I've been bumping into is how to get it from the camera onto my computer, or vice versa, or ways to traverse between. Because, well, let's see, if I take a picture with my camera, it's hard to get it to social media. If I take it with my camera and I want to work on it on my computer, I've been sort of mucking around with trying out SmugMug and using that as an intermediary. But I'd be interested in exploring if there's I think I asked you last month if if this Lightroom could be integrated. We tend to use Lightroom Classic, but I know there's the Lightroom.
Lightroom Mobile, yeah.
And I don't know if those talk to each other. And
well, yes, they do. They do communicate. However, what you're looking for is some way of getting from this device to your laptop, right? Going from
easily,
this?
Yes.
Okay. There's a couple of ways you can do it. The easiest way is this. Plug it in. All right. Go through the little setup, and you're able to access all the files on your device through the USB cord. All right. That's one way of doing it.
That's my current. Yeah.
All right. So it's just as if you plugged in any other camera into your computer. All right. You're just going to navigate to the appropriate file, right? Because the operating system on a phone is different than that of a desktop. It may initially take you some fiddling around to discover where the actual folder is that contains all your images. All right, so that's one way of doing it. Another way is if your images are sent to the cloud automatically. So I know a lot of iPhones will keep a file resident on the device, but we'll also upload the file to the cloud. Okay. And if you have an Android device and you have a Google account, you can set this up to also do the same thing, where whatever any pictures you take here get sent to Google Pictures, all right, or Picasa, or one of those, all right. And at that point, all you got to do is get into a browser, go to that where you know the cloud where it gets uploaded to, and then just download them to your computer that way. All right, which tends to be the way I do it, because I don't pull a lot of images from here. An occasional, once in a blue moon, I'll do it. So I'll just go to Google Photos, look for my image, and then download that image. You know, so there's two ways that you can do it.
And I use Dropbox for that.
Okay, yeah. So wherever you send it to, you know, that's where you would go to download it.
I noticed Dropbox gets kind of pissy about when you put a photo in there where you can send it, though. They get kind of persnickety about letting them. Has been my
I've never had any trouble with that, but that's me.
Yeah, I don't have too many issues with Dropbox. I find more issues with Google Drive than I do with Dropbox. Google Drive is always looking for, make sure you got the right permissions, and if you don't, it creates a big hassle, and yeah, so. But yeah, I've never encountered too many issues with Dropbox. Dropbox was initially designed specifically for the purpose of sharing files, so they try to make it as easy as possible. So, okay. All right. Awesome. Good questions there. Any other questions? Doesn't have to be, you know, like I said, doesn't have to be what we discussed today. Okay, guys, I really, really do appreciate you guys hanging out with me on a Monday night. Hopefully, you all learned something new today, and from some of the feedback, I think you did. And that makes me very happy because I want to make sure you guys walk away with, even if it's a small aha moment, I want you to walk away with an aha moment. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you very much. We will see you hopefully next Monday for Photoshop.
Thanks, Doug.
Thanks,
Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.